Good morning. This is Jason Dean. Happy post Thanksgiving. Hope everyone is still full and had, some quality time with their friends and family or not. Usually, a lot of the times for people, the holidays can be pretty stressful because you're kind of forced to hang out and be with family members you might not, see eye to eye with, or that there's some kind of other issue. And I totally understand that. Usually for me, for Thanksgiving, it's pretty mellow and pretty quiet. It's literally just me, my folks, and our cats. That's really it. Growing up, we always had big Thanksgivings. I grew up in New York, and most of my family still lives in New York. So that was how I was always accustomed to having these big, kind of gatherings. I kind of, as I've gotten older, and since my folks had moved to Maine, and I eventually moved to Maine shortly after that, we always had very mellow holidays. But I kind of like them overall. That in that capacity a little bit more. Occasionally, we'll have over the years there might be some one or two other people that would also join us, but usually it's just the three of us, so it's usually pretty cool. But we always have a tradition, being that this is a movie page, and I'm trying to always talk about just my passion for these movies that I see, and a tradition that was we always watch movies, and that's a big part. After dinner, we usually watch like at least two movies. We do a double header. We did that last night. We watched Ty West Ty West's new movie that just came out, Pearl, which is the prequel for X, which is going to be the topic of today's show. I was really, really excited to see this film. Huge fan of X. I think well, when I saw that in the theater, I'd been pretty familiar with Ty West before, and I thought, he's got some real, as a director and a writer and overall filmmaker. Some of his films I like, and then some of them I thought were pretty good. But overall, I thought like he's definitely a force, and I felt after seeing X, I saw that in the theater, that it was probably the best thing he's ever done and best film project he's ever been involved in. And I've been following his career for a really long time, so I was really excited to see the this prequel. Which, as I get into this whole discussion, I just feel like the way the whole marketing thing was, the narrative, the time frame, uh, everything about it with these two movies, completely original, and a whole new concept of how a person can view movies, or the narrative around a storyline, and even mixing things up as far as having these unique release dates around a group of films. Just I feel like in that regard, pretty innovative. So, but again, I want to thank everybody for checking out the page. I really love that this whole thing has been growing. I love people have been starting to comment more. All the fine folks have been checking out this weird little channel I do, and I really appreciate that. I always say this is all a work in progress. I'm kind of learning as I go, trying to get things more focused, and I really appreciate people, chiming in and making feedback and even suggestions along those lines. I really appreciate that because, it's all, at the end of the day, it's about these films that I really love and that I hold dear to my heart. So it's really about that being the centerpiece, the movie being the centerpiece. So I'm trying to move everything more in that direction so it can hopefully be more entertaining and a concise package of what I'm talking about. So getting back to Ty West, so I discovered him quite a few years ago in another previous video that I did. I talked about some of the newer horror films that have been coming out, and I had made a comment saying I was talking about Ty West, how I felt X was definitely one of the best horror movies I've seen as far as very recent. Came out this year, actually. And I kind of feel overall like it's probably the best horror movie I've seen easily in 2022. And probably for that matter in general. I think it was a tremendous movie. I'm going to be doing a review for that following Pearl, which is what today's show is going to be about. And Ty West just had, uh, a real great. He's been around for about, I'd say 15 years already, which is hard to believe. But I've been following his career. Probably the film that I got of his and that I'd seen, and I had seen it and then I eventually bought it, and it made me pay attention to him as a director, was House of the Devil. Very cool movie, very highly stylized kind of a movie that was taken, and the whole thing took place during the 80s, so it really captures that time period, all the aesthetics that he used. Very cool movie. Similar, I think, similar in tone to Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby, the classic horror movie from 1967. And in some ways modeled off of that, but I think he has his own kind of footprint and his own style. He's done, like I said, quite a few movies. He's Pearl, his being his most recent, X, House of the Devil, The Innkeepers, Maxine, The Sacrament, and The Valley of Violence, which I believe is a western that he's done. He's primarily, I would say overall, Ty West is definitely a horror movie director. He did a segment for that series, VHS, which is actually a really good series. They're like a collection of movies that are shot like a found footage kind of concept, and he did one of the films, one of the shorts for that collection, which is really good. He also did Cabin Fever too, which I didn't realize. Few of his films I have not seen. He also was in. He's actually done a few roles as an actor. He was in You're Next, which is actually a pretty cool movie. I might eventually do a show on that. But anyway, when I was talking about earlier, when on a previous video I had talked a little bit about Ty West, and I was saying, how that movie I felt like a great example of a newer, more contemporary horror film that is, just really great, and a standalone film, very original. It really reminded me very much so of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The original had that kind of vibe to it. And his career kind of started with, he was working with Larry Fenderson. And Larry Fenderson is also, in his own right, a really great, awesome director. He did this really awesome movie called Habit, probably almost 20 years ago. And he's gone on to direct a whole bunch of other horror movies. He acts as a producer on his films and other projects, other directors that he works with. And during that time, about 15, 20 years ago, he started Glass Eye Pix. Larry Fenderson started Glass Eye Pix. And what he did was his whole thing is very much focused on independent horror film, very low budget oriented kind of works. And he's worked with a bunch of other directors that have all kind of created their own careers, and they're all based kind of in the indie world, in the indie world of horror. And probably his biggest success was working with Ty West. And Ty West was somebody that he took under his wing, and he produced all of his movies from the get-go, and really kind of developed him as a director. And with X, I feel like it made the most money out of for his career, and I think it even though it's still a very low budget movie, it really created a buzz around him and gave him legitimacy for for a bigger market. That he's a real force right now. And for my taste, I feel like these two movies are definitely his best movies. They just have, I don't know. After following Ty West, I've been following his career for quite a few years. I really see his whole kind of mode of operation and how he develops these films, and also is involved with writing a lot of the scripts. And the other thing that's awesome and really commendable about Ty West is that he creates everything. It's all original content. It's not really based on any other work out there. So it's pretty commendable. But he's really emerged, and I feel like with all the movies he's been doing, and that he's been around for a long time, he's built a pretty cool career. But these two movies, X and Pearl, really solidify him as like a real force right now. And I think it's an important time, probably the most important time to see where he'll go as a director. And he's like, I feel like now he's like fully established as a director, and he's come 100% into his own. So I was super excited. Like I said, I loved X, and I'm going to be doing a review for that film after this one. I just saw Pearl last night, so I wanted to do it quickly since it's real fresh on in my brain, and I just watched it. And I had a real big anticipation to see this film. I was going to try to go see it in the theater, but I didn't. I missed it, unfortunately. I did get to see X in the theater. The other super cool thing about Pearl, and like I said, the overall kind of marketing and the way the whole narrative of these two films kind of came about. When we saw X in the theater, I was there with some friends, and I went into it pretty cold, and I was pretty blown away by how suspenseful it was, and it was just the atmosphere for the film was just tremendous, and it very much reminded me of. In a lot of ways, I definitely say it's a modern slasher film. It definitely has that, but it's a slow burn movie. But it has all of this incredible atmosphere, where there's not necessarily any dialogue. There's not too many things that actually are happening, but you're just getting this sense of this like kind of impending dread that's kind of permeating the scene. And at the conclusion of X, all of a sudden this trailer came up for Pearl, and Pearl is basically the killer. I guess you could say the killer, or like the quote unquote the mass villain, because it's definitely a slasher film. But the killer in the movie is centered around this old couple, and particularly this incredibly old woman her name is Pearl. And she is like responsible for all of these heinous crimes and killing all of the kids in the movie. And Pearl is basically a prequel of her life and who she was, and where how she became this essentially a serial killer. And I remember seeing the trailer right after X had ended, and I was like, wow, like that. It just looked larger than life. It just looked amazing, and I was like, I couldn't wait to see it. I was super excited. So I was really excited to see it. So, and the thing that's amazing about this film, and both of these films, is Mia Goth. She is such a tremendous actress. I had never heard of her before. I never seen anything about her before. And I think she right now is pretty much the best actress around for my money. So much depth, so much ability. Not only in the first X, she plays two roles. She plays her own character, and then she also plays the old woman who's the killer. Extraordinary. I didn't realize this until a few months after I'd seen the film, I thought, okay, there's two separate actresses playing these roles, and I thought her role was extraordinary in X. And then when I found out that she played both of those roles, I was just completely blown away. Just completely blown away. And she's an English actress, and I had never seen her before, but I've done some research, and she was in Nymphomaniac, which I have not seen. I've been wanting to see it. And Nymphomaniac, I believe, is the sequel to Lars von Trier's Antichrist. She also did a film which I have heard about, Cure for Wellness, and then another film called Emma. And she was also in the remake of Suspiria, which I have heard is actually really good. It's a remake of Dario Argento's classic film from the 70s. You know, the iconic horror film that it is. And I've heard a lot of good things about the remake, which came out in 2018 already. But I didn't know Mia Goth was in that. So X was basically the first time I'd ever seen her, and I was just blown away by her ability as an actress. And then I read an interview and said, and I saw an interview with Mia Goth, and she was talking about how she also uh, co-wrote the script for Pearl, and also acted as a producer and put some of her own money into it. And I was like, wow, like she's amazing. But I feel like her ability as an actress is just unbelievable. She has such a range. There's a few scenes in Pearl that where it's literally just her in the room, or in a room with other characters, and there are these like 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minute segments of where she's acting, and it's just dialogue, and it's just incredible. I found myself, especially around those scenes, where I was completely glued to the screen. The other thing that's so cool about Pearl, the timeline for X basically takes place in the 70s. And Ty West did an amazing job with capturing that vibe, you know, with the design of the film, the music. And it really feels like you're in Texas in the 70s. That's the other reason it very much reminds me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then I've recently found out that both of these films were filmed together, more or less, in New Zealand during a lockdown at the height of the pandemic. And they were basically trapped in New Zealand. That's where they shot X. And because they were not allowed to leave the country, or couldn't leave the country for a long period of time, they had been snowballing. Ty West and Mia Goth had both been, you know, in constant communication and in this space of development of an idea to do a prequel, because they were basically essentially trapped in this country during the pandemic. Just wild circumstances. And when I found out that this film was shot in New Zealand, I was completely blown away, because it really feels like the South, like the American South. Real testimony to the high level craftsmanship of these filmmakers. And I feel like Mia Goth has everything. She's got, not only is she drop dead gorgeous, she has, she's incredibly intelligent. She has such a range. There's also these elaborate kind of dance sequences in the film that are just wild. And the other thing that's really cool is like the timeline. So for X takes place, it all takes place like in the 70s. And it's an origin story of Pearl, who is the killer, the old woman. And so the time frame or timeline of Pearl takes place in the early 1900s. I believe it's like 1914. And she is living on this farm. She's trapped with his family and her family, and they're refusing to let her leave, and she's living on this farm. And she's basically like 16, 17. She's a teenager. And she's, you know, where the film kind of starts, she is, you know, she's becoming an adult. And she's trying to break out and break free from the restraints of her family that are, you know, that are and they're completely like slowly, draining the life out of her, and and also that whole lifestyle is just kind of killing her. And she has these, huge ambitions of becoming an actress and a dancer and a performer. And the whole time frame, it's all shot. The other thing that's so cool is that it's all shot in Technicolor, so it feels like you're watching a film from the 1900s. It's gorgeous, and it's larger than life. The tonality of the film is so different, and it has a bigger scale of, or it's you're getting a bigger scope of things. And there's all these interesting references to one scene in particular, without giving anything away. But there's kind of a reference to The Wizard of Oz, which I thought was pure genius. There's a scene where she is in this cornfield and she encounters this scarecrow, and it's just an extraordinary scene, completely disturbing and strange, but just kind of a masterstroke. And the writing for this film is just tremendous, and it definitely delivers in always horror. It's definitely a horror film. The kills are amazing, but it has a totally the tonal shift is, and the whole universe is so different from X. So it really is like this breath of fresh air, and it's a gorgeous. Not only is it a tremendous movie, it's visually it's one of the definitely one of the most gorgeous films I've seen in a while. Ty West, like, he really knocked it out of the park with this film. I think, as much as I like X, and I know it's kind of a stretch to maybe say it, but as much as I've liked X, and I don't own either of the movies yet, but I'm definitely going to buy them on Blu-ray. As much as I love X, I almost found myself liking Pearl a little bit more, just because of the amazing depth that they put and exploration of her character is phenomenal. Like, you really get a sense of where her character came from and why she basically becomes this, insane serial killer. Just a tremendous movie. I and the film score for Pearl is just one of the best film scores I've heard in so long. It's incredibly beautiful and sublime, but then it's completely horrific at the same time. And I love how they introduce the way they're able to kind of introduce the horror element or the darker aspects of the film, and it's got this contrast because it's larger than life. It's all like Technicolor. Everything is so bright and beautiful, and then they slowly introduce these horror elements, and it's just kind of boiling underneath the surface, and then you start seeing shades, and you start hearing these traces of other this impending horror that's coming your way, and you're kind of I find myself you're slowly kind of preparing yourself for that, but it's real subtle at first, and then it does shift, and then it does move and go into those directions. And I thought they just did such a brilliant job, because at face value, if you watch the movie, 20 minutes into it, even a half hour into it, it doesn't necessarily feel like a horror film. It doesn't feel like a slasher film. And I was really curious as to where this film was going to go, and I thought it was amazing. The other thing that's super cool and interesting about this film is it's during the 1900s. That was when the Spanish flu was the pandemic, and wreaking havoc all around the world. And so the whole all of these characters, and the way this world is presented, that's a factor. So there's all these scenes of the characters going about their daily lives wearing masks, and there are people who are isolating and people who are getting sick left and right, and just the amazing parallels between that and the pandemic that we're going through now. It was really fascinating, and I thought that was a really great spin, and a really great direction to take the film, to take it there and to show these parallels to how people are living now. Just brilliant and an amazing film. And, and the other thing is you don't. They're both like standalone films, and they're interesting because Pearl came out, I believe, maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, and it was in the theater, and from what I know, it was very successful. So was X financially; they were both like big hits. They and it got a lot of great acclaim, rightfully so. And the fact that both of these films were kind of shot back to back, and that the prequel, Pearl, was released a few months after. I've never really seen that ever happen in the world of like of filmmaking or like the way you market, say, a franchise. Like it was totally interesting and innovative, and then also have a trailer for the prequel film at the end of technically the first film in this possible trilogy or this series. And I thought that was super interesting and innovative and just like amazing. Just if you're a fan of the movie and you're into it, it's like the perfect marketing kind of scheme, and it worked for me. And but a real interesting model, like unlike any other form of marketing that I've ever seen. Totally original, and I thought it totally worked. And they in both films, I feel like they're definitely their 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 own thing. I would say, even though this is a prequel, it might even be the way to. If you've never seen either X or Pearl, I think the way to go would be to see X first and then see Pearl. Like just how the order is, it totally makes sense. And but yet they're all, you can watch one without the other. I thought that's another great thing is they're both the same story, but they're so different from each other. They're both definitely horror films, but there's such a tonal difference. And I've never really seen that before. I've never really seen a filmmaker take a chance, or a studio for that matter, take a chance with doing something so fresh and innovative as far as storyline. Not only having two incredible movies back to back, but then the whole marketing strategy around it, just totally innovative. And I feel like it's a whole new, almost business model for marketing. Just totally innovative. I feel like, like I said, Mia Goth is probably one of the best, if not the best actress around. She's got everything. She's beautiful. She's got the brains. She's highly intelligent. She has such a range as an actress. It's unbelievable. There's scenes in the film where she's so in Pearl where you see how broken and terrified she is, but then you also see that she is like capable of like some of the most heinous, brutality that you can conceive of. And she has all of these struggles, and there's so many complex things to her character, but you get such a sense from what she represents on the big screen, and what on how she arrived to where she became this serial killer. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. There's the other thing. Mia Goth really reminds me a lot, and I remember commenting to my folks about it. Is that she really reminds me a lot of Charlize Theron, who is another actress I've always loved, who has that kind of range. She's beautiful. She's definitely got that star quality, but she's got real depth as an actress, where she could do anything. And that's what I felt when I saw Mia Goth, especially in these movies, and especially Pearl, because it's really her. It's really her. I feel like she's given that true kind of audience, or that spotlight, to really shine and show her ability. And that being said, she doesn't steal the show in Pearl. I feel like the cast itself is wonderful. I cared about everyone who was on the big screen, even if that's testimony to great filmmaking. Is even if characters, you're getting enough exposition, and you're getting just the right amount of information about whoever's on screen or whatever the story is about. and you just and it can be a character that might not really be might not even play like say an integral part on the in the story, but you're getting just enough information that it it piques your curiosity and you're drawn into it, and then you have empathy towards them and you care about what happens to them. And that was completely how I felt about Pearl. Like all of the characters, the ensemble cast is so great, and yet she is the star of the film. Mia Goth is definitely the star, and she's in almost virtually every scene of the movie, which is tremendous. And there's so much dialogue, and she just you know goes beyond the Call of Duty. Tremendous movie. So yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough. And I'm not someone who has like faith or who I mean, I guess at one point I used to follow award shows and and I used to watch, years ago I used to have that yearly ritual of like watching the Academy Awards and seeing, all of the films that would be nominated, and I would stay up on the films that were nominated during that process, who was up for best director, best actor, best foreign film, and I used to stay up on that way back in the day, and I would watch a lot of the films. So any of the films that were typically nominated during that season, I had already seen or was familiar, and I would always kind of you know make a little list on my own as to what I felt was the best picture of the year or the best director. But I've never I've kind of forgotten about all of that stuff. I feel like it's more of a political thing than anything. I mean, every now and then you'll get something that will get nominated and it will win an award, but it's always, I feel like, a crap show for the most. One of the big examples of that would be when Denis Villeneuve, one of my favorite directors, he won Best Picture for Dune, which is an amazing film, but then he got ignored as best director. So there's all these like weird inconsistencies, which never makes any sense. So and typically when it comes to the horror genre, that doesn't really get any clout from big Hollywood as being like looked at as a bona fide art form, and that some of these actors and actresses in these films put out these legendary roles. Um, and I feel like even though I don't have any faith, I don't really buy into that whole the Academy Award system. I automatically I thought, or my first reaction was, Mia Goth has to get nominated for this film. It probably won't happen, but just unbelievable, unbelievable. The last time I believe that an actress from a horror film was nominated, or the last movie that had that kind of acclaim was Ari Aster's Hereditary. And then it was later kind of dismissed. But instantly after I had finished watching Pearl, I was just like, this is like the best acting I've seen this year by far. There's no comparison at all. Yeah, so that's what it was. It was Hereditary, which is an amazing horror movie that came out in 2018. Toni Collette, she was the actress that was nominated for that film, who was probably most well known. She was in The Sixth Sense. Toni Collette's an amazing actress. She's been around for quite a few years, but an amazing world class actress. And I believe she was like, I think she might have been nominated for an Academy Award for Hereditary. But other than that, it's an incredibly rare thing, and I feel like Mia Goth is that actress. Like, she's the best thing I think around, and yeah, I can't say enough. So get a chance, please see Pearl. It's an amazing film. I think it's a cooler thing, or might be a better experience, to actually watch X and then Pearl afterwards. even though they're very, very much their own, their standalone films, but amazing, and also an amazing collection of horror films. And Pearl is just just an extraordinary, an extraordinarily original horror film. Ty West is just knocking it out of the park. I can't wait to see what he does next. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again. Happy post Thanksgiving. If you get a chance, please like and subscribe to my channel, and we will see you next time. Peace.